They're not good enough to start. They're not even good enough to play. But they do talk a good game. So come join Lou and Jose from the sidelines where all the best sports discussions happen anyway. Welcome in to the Benchwarmerz podcast.
Welcome into the program, everybody. I'm Lou Ruggieri, that's Jose Ortiz, and this is the Benchwarmerz podcast. Wherever, whenever, and however you happen to be listening, we appreciate you taking some time out to spend it with us. We're going to try to make it worth your while. And boy, oh boy, do we have a show for you today. Happy day, happy day. Football's back and ready to play. And I just made that up, and now you can see why I do radio and not children's rhymes, because that was terrible. Coming up in the second hour, we have all football. We're going to revisit some of our early season projections. We're allowed one last change up, and we're going to make those changes today, and they're going to be locked in, and we're going to have to come up with some kind of bet for who's right and who's wrong. We'll see. We can always take some suggestions. A lot of NFL, big news lines in the NFL world, a few key questions we came up with to kind of answer amongst ourselves in the second hour. At the back end of this first hour, we're going to touch on the NBA and the playoffs. And to start off, we have to go through some football news because there's a lot of it. And the football season is days and hours away. And Jose, I just want to point out that being able to watch football and watch the NBA playoffs in the same day, even in the same week, feels kind of like an apology from the universe for the last sportless 6 months, I think. And so I am thrilled. Thrilled is an understatement.
I'm fired up and ready to go. I'm going to be trying to get my extra husband points in over the next couple days because Thursday's game time. And
yes.
I don't know. I'm going to be like, my wife's going to be like, well, can't we spend some time together? I'm like, listen, it's not my fault the NFL scheduled these games. Like, what do you want me to do?
If you want
to watch them, obviously.
Spend some time watching the game with me, then by all means.
Yeah,
but
I call it loving football. We can lay and watch football, and it's fine. But no, I'm fired up. I'm ready to go.
Funny story, but I actually I was talking to a girl just randomly. This sort of just triggered a memory, and I was asking her, like, what are your favorite TV shows? And verbatim, she said, I don't watch a lot of TV because I'm always watching sports. And I stopped and I was like, wait, what did you just say? Like, how are you single? Because do you want to get married right now? Because do you know how many guys look and search the world high and low for one woman to say that? No, it made me laugh. I actually laughed out loud when she said it. I was like, wow, that's great. But okay, you can follow along if you want to call me a sexist or anything like that. You can email us at Yahoo, the Benchwarmerz podcast at yahoo.com, Benchwarmerz with a Z for marketing purposes. We are part of the iHeartRadio podcasting lineup, and proudly so. You can also find us on Spotify. We are on YouTube, though we don't have any video up. We are working on sort of simulcasting this show in the very near future. Now that we have football back, we can be a little more exuberant and animated, so that might work well with TV. I'll try to be pretty. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Twitter handle is at the BW Pod, so you can throw all your hate there or love, as it were. Google Play, Apple Podcasts. Pretty much, if you're listening to this podcast, you already know where to find us. So that drives me crazy when podcast people say that and they go out of their way to say. And the word, for some reason, the plural of podcasts, like when people say podcasts online, it's always overly modulated, and the S I don't know. It's a little pet peeve I have. Anyway. Moving on. So on to NFL news. We're going to just jump in, hit the ground running. There's a lot of news to cover, a lot of NFL to talk. And Jose, I just want to start with Jadeveon Clowney is the first thing that we kind of have on the board because, after a lengthy kind of free agency period where he was sort of dancing around, he almost signed with the Saints. The Saints apparently have about $30 left in their salary cap. So they were trying to do a sign-in trade, but then the NFL said, no, you're not doing that. So Jadeveon Clowney ended up with the Titans for a one-year deal for $12 million that I think is bonus incentivized up to about $15 million. And, first and foremost, how do you feel about Jadeveon Clowney joining the Tennessee Titans?
Well, you certainly have to. You certainly have to upgrade their defense. Jadeveon Clowney is a highly talented defensive end, great player. I'm surprised he got the contract, to be honest with you, and I'm surprised he got that much money because there's really no one bidding against the Titans. I don't know. If I'm Jadeveon Clowney, I'm giving my agent an extra bonus or something like that, because to get 1 year, $12 million with a potential $15 million when you were like basically you were going to not be playing this year. So I'm surprised he got that much money, but it does certainly elevate the Titans defense.
Yeah, I think Jadeveon Clowney, because he has a former relationship. I think it's from when they were on the Texans with Mike Vrabel. So
Yep.
he there's a familiarity there. Mike Vrabel kind of played. I mean, he didn't play like Jadeveon Clowney, but he was pretty good in his own right. So he has a familiarity with the system that Vrabel has running. They have a pre-existing relationship. So Vrabel understands how Clowney, his strengths and weaknesses. So it kind of felt like square peg round hole when Clowney was on the Seahawks, because it almost felt like he was kind of lost and wasn't sure what he was supposed to be doing. So at least I think he's a good fit. I think he can benefit from sort of that Titan up, which is the worst nickname, slogan rather, in football. But it's that mentality that the Titans have. They kind of have that smash mouth, hard nosed football, and I think that could benefit Clowney, because when he's on, he's unstoppable. The only
thing I would say about Clowney is I'm waiting for him to show me that he's an elite player for a full season. Yes. Yeah, for one game or 2 games, or for one play or 2 plays, he's elite and amazing. Yeah. But I just haven't seen it for a full year yet, and so you're probably about to get to that. It's just something I've noticed about him. He's been okay throughout his career. So
yeah, I always thought that he should have been better when he was on the Texans. But speaking of the Texans, next news item: Deshaun Watson signs a 4-year, $160 million contract extension. So good for $40 million a year. Pretty good scratch in my book. Do you think that he deserved it? Is the question.
Well, it's just hard, because this is what the cost of quarterbacks are. I don't think that Dak. I don't think that Deshaun Watson is necessarily a $40 million a year quarterback, but I believe he's under 25 years old. He's been probably a top 7 NFL quarterback throughout his career, top 5-ish. So if you want to keep him and not have to start over, you kind of have to pay him this much money. I guess the long-winded answer is yes. I guess he's worth it. I'm just blown away by how much money quarterbacks get paid. I continue to be amazed by how much money they get paid. And it just seems like it keeps going up, and I'm just waiting for Dak Prescott to be next. But please weigh in on Deshaun Watson here.
Okay, so I guess it is the going rate, but I don't know. It's hard to gauge, because Deshaun Watson, and especially when he's contrasted with a guy like Dak Prescott, and so we'll sort of transition to Dak, because everything revolves around the Dallas Cowboys. It feels like Deshaun Watson. We saw him just dominate at Clemson. That championship game, he won the game for them. He was picked, first round, 12th overall, in 2017 draft, I believe. And it feels like he's been handcuffed in a way with Bill O'Brien and sort of some of the talent that's been around. He's had some talent, but he's been, that team has been marred with injuries. They're sort of just up and down. They're hot and cold. And I think that has a lot to do with Bill O'Brien trying to be GM and head coach at the same time. Whereas Dak, so it feels like the Deshaun has succeeded despite the team around him. By contrast, it feels like Dak Prescott, 4th rounds, it feels like he's had success because the team around him is so good. It sort of reminds me of Russell Wilson versus Jared Goff. Jared Goff's surrounded by just an inexorable amount of talent. And, Russell Wilson, not so much. He had a good team early on, but I'm talking about lately, it's kind of been the Russell Wilson show, where Pete Carroll just kind of says, all right, man, I don't know, go do something. So that's sort of the parallel I would put on the Deshaun Watson-Dak Prescott relationship.
I would just say that and we argue about this all the time. I would just say that Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins is better than any wide receiver than Dak Prescott has ever had.
I agree.
Period.
I agree. Yes.
So you're right. You're certainly right. Zeke is better than any running back that Deshaun Watson has ever had. Just quickly to touch on your Russell Wilson, Jared Goff, I would say that Russell Wilson definitely has a better roster than Jared Goff right now offensively. Just in my opinion.
In their Super Bowl year.
Oh, in the Super Bowl you're fine. I guess because Gurley, it's really just Gurley. Because Robert Woods, okay. Brandon Cooks, okay. Cooper Kupp, okay. But yeah, as far as Dak Prescott, you're probably right that he's not worth that much money. I just don't know what else you do anymore. It doesn't seem like there's any other option on the table. You just give these guys the money, or you start over in the draft. Because or you go with Andy Dalton as your starter next year. I don't really know what you do other than pay these guys anymore.
Yeah, and just to counter that wide receiver point. So yeah, if you were to make a list of the top 10 wide receivers on both of these teams, on the Texans and the Cowboys, DeAndre Hopkins at number 1, but then the next 5 might be Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you could say, well, who was there? Will Fuller was there for a little while. I mean, he's when he plays.
Yeah, when
great.
he plays, he's still there. Yeah, that's
he's
fair.
great 3 games a year, but Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and now CeeDee Lamb. I mean, that's not even close.
Yeah, no,
but
definitely.
Either way, I just think that if you put Deshaun Watson on the Cowboys and you put Dak Prescott on the Texans, I think those teams go in completely opposite directions. I think the Cowboys would just be probably in the Super Bowl, and the Texans would not even make the playoffs. I think Dak's ceiling is just not nearly anywhere near as high as Deshaun Watson's.
And I agree that Dak is not as good as Deshaun Watson. I don't think he's that far off, but I agree that Deshaun Watson's better.
Yeah. And speaking of receivers, the next bit of news, Keenan Allen signs a 4-year, $80 million extension. And I know we kind of had a joke about kind of Keenan Allen. We were just talking, he's sort of one of the most boring, prolific receivers in existence. And we were trying to dissect why he kind of reminds me of like a lesser talented Julio Jones. Like on the field, he's just a great receiver. He just does things better than most cornerbacks. But off the field, you don't hear about him. He doesn't make noise. He's not like the, typical Antonio Brown, Terrell Owens, diva wide receiver who's always, Michael Irvin, flashy, loud, obnoxious. He kind of just does his thing on the field and then goes home.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of advertising either. I don't think he has a lot of sponsorships that I'm aware of. So Julio Jones does fly under the radar. Yeah, Keenan Allen, I think this is a great signing. Keenan Allen, I was looking at his numbers, almost 1,400 yards in 2017. Nearly 1,200 yards in the last 2 seasons. He's only missed 3 games. Oh no, he hasn't missed any games. I'm sorry, in the last 3 years. So this is an easy signing. He's 27 years old. You lock him up. He's basically in the prime of his career. I think this is great. Yeah, no complaints on this signing. He's one of the best receivers in the game. Just very undervalued.
Yeah, and I think a big thing with him is that early on he was kind of injury prone. He had a couple bad injuries that kind of sidelined him for most of the season. And
yeah,
I think that sort of became kind of the stigma that was attached to him. So everyone kind of wrote him off as like, oh, well, he could have been good, but he's injured. But then he got it together. And
I think the other 2 things that go against him is that he's one, the Chargers haven't been extremely relevant since he's been with them.
Yeah.
And I mean, they probably had some better seasons than I'm remembering, but I don't recall any sort of deep playoff runs where you could really focus in on him. And then he's a slot receiver, so he's not that exciting outside threat, deep down the field threat that makes the highlight grabs that you see on YouTube and everything like that. So I just think, yeah, like you said, he's a little undervalued for a number of reasons.
Yeah. And so next item up for discussion, the Patriots cut Lamar Miller, which I was kind of surprised about because the Patriots don't have any skill position players, and Lamar Miller, despite his mediocrity, is probably better than everyone on that running back roster, except maybe you can make a case for Sony Michel. I don't know. I was very surprised by this.
Well, Lamar Miller's coming off, I think, an ACL tear last year. He's been a mediocre running back for most of his career. It is highlighted more by the fact that Damian Harris was just put on the injured reserve, right? So with Sony Michel, you could say, okay, fine, Sony Michel's the starting running back. But now that Damian Harris is on the IR, and I'm not sure how many games it's going to be now because there's different rules with the COVID era now, but who's your number 2 running back? You're like James White, I guess. Rex Burkhead. Yeah. It doesn't feel like they have a very strong running back core, and after Damian Harris went on IR, that's when it made me question it. At the time, I didn't expect Lamar Miller to make the team before that, but now it seems very questionable.
Yeah, and then the two more Patriots items while we're on the topic. Cam Newton named Patriots starter over Jarrett Stidham.
Shocker.
Zero surprise there whatsoever. And then what was surprising, though, was that the Patriots cut Mohamed Sanu, or they released him, I guess. They spent a 4th-round draft pick on him last year. And who are you going to play wide receiver for the Patriots this year, Jose? Because I don't know who else they have. Like, why would you? I don't understand that at all.
Well, there's certainly not a market for 5'6" wide receivers, so I don't think that I'm getting out there. But that was a shock. That's more shocking.
Like 5'9". So.
That's true. That was a shocker. That was more shocking to me than the Lamar Miller cut, because you're right. N'Keal Harry hasn't shown much. I guess they're relying on N'Keal Harry to be the guy. Yeah. I mean, obviously Julian Edelman's still there, and he's probably going to man the number 1 receiver slot, but after you get past N'Keal Harry and Julian Edelman, Jacoby Myers, I guess, would be the number 3 receiver. I don't even know who they're throwing. Devin Asiasi is going to be the tight end that they're targeting. So it does seem odd. It's just like, why are you removing offensive weapons? They just must plan on really, really running the ball a lot, which then doesn't jive with cutting Lamar Miller. So I don't know.
It's very strange. I'm sure Bill Belichick has a plan. It's beyond my scope of reasoning right now. But speaking of Patriots, former Patriot Tom Brady got a new toy. The Jags are just having a fire sale on every player on earth. They shouldn't play. And I think that the Jags are actually on TV for one game this year. And the NFL, I want to just implore you, please don't put the Jaguars on TV this year. It's just going to be embarrassing and going to be bad for the league. So Leonard Fournette is the latest casualty in the Jags fire sale, signed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I thought it was interesting that, in the last month or two, I think Tom Brady has gotten more free agents around him than in the last 5 years in New England.
Yeah, he's got an all-star squad around him right now. You look at Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and now Gronkowski's back, pairing with O.J. Howard and Cameron Braid. And you thought Ronald Jones was going to run away with his job, and no, now you're adding Leonard Fournette plus LaShawn McCoy.
And McCoy,
so there's a lot of, and also Keyshawn Vaughn, who they drafted as well, I think in the 3rd round. So there's a lot of talent on that roster, and there's zero excuses other than coronavirus. Obviously that's a menacing threat that's hanging over everything right now, but Leonard Fournette, you would have to think by mid-season, should supplant Ronald Jones, just based on draft pedigree and what we've seen in the NFL so far. I don't think it's a stretch to say Leonard Fournette's a better running back than Ronald Jones. And Ronald Jones had trouble holding off Peyton Barber last season.
That's true.
You can't hold off Peyton Barber. How are you holding off Leonard Fournette, who's, by the way, hungry to prove that he's not a bust, that the problem was the Jaguars. I don't know if you saw one of his quotes today. He said, "Finally, I have a real quarterback," quote unquote. So, which is true. I mean, I don't want to, it's true. Feel bad for Gardner Minshew there, but still,
he wears true. It's hard to feel bad for somebody who wears jorts regularly. But just for perspective, 2019, Leonard Fournette had 1,152 rushing yards on 265 carries. So that's not bad. He also had 76 catches for over 500 yards receiving. So he's a productive player. So
he's not the most efficient guy in the world. He's not the most efficient guy in the world. That's the big knock against him.
Right.
It seems like he only gets what's blocked, essentially.
Yeah. Which is the big problem, and I think that's the one thing that the Bucs are going to struggle with is that their offensive line is just not great, and that's problematic to say the least.
They added Tristan Wirfs, so you'd hope that he's a first-round draft pick, so you'd hope that he upgrades them, but we'll see.
Yeah. So moving on. So this is the Benchwarmerz podcast. I'm Lou, that's Jose, and we're touching on some NFL news. Just so you know, you can find us iHeartRadio podcasting app, YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Email us, the Benchwarmers podcast at yahoo.com, Benchwarmers with a Z. Ryan Fitzpatrick, named starter for week 1 for the Dolphins. And personally, I think that this is a wonderful idea and a very smart move because Tua Tagovailoa he's coming, he looks good on film or whatever. And, but he is injury prone, and even if there's even the slightest hint that he's not completely 100% ready to go, even if he was, I still think learning from a 37-year-old, smart quarterback who's played for 8 teams in 16 years, you could learn a lot, a la Aaron Rodgers, who am I thinking of?
Brett Favre.
Patrick Mahomes, yeah. And just guys that have sat behind kind of knowledgeable players. I think that this is a great move, and I do expect Tua to be the starter later in the season, but I'm glad to see that the Dolphins are taking the long view on this and doing it the right way.
Well, and here's the other thing that's the reality of the AFC East right now. It's more winnable than it's ever been. Not to say that I think the Dolphins have a chance to win, but everyone's 0-0 right now, or 0-0. And Ryan Fitzpatrick has proven that he can be a capable NFL starter. Yeah. So you get off to a decent start. Why not the Dolphins? The 49ers were a 4-win team in 2018 and went to the Super Bowl 2019. Sure. Teams have dramatic turnarounds. So why not the Dolphins go with the guy who gives your team a chance? They signed Jordan Howard. They signed Matt Breida. They signed they drafted Tua, but they kept Ryan Fitzpatrick. They have a team that can compete right now. I don't expect them to go very far, but you got to give yourself a chance to win. You go 0-4, 0-5 out of the gate, 1-6. Yeah, then you bring in Tua and see what the kid can do.
Yeah, let him get some reps and get used to the speed of the game. And speaking of the Dolphins, they and quarterbacks, they cut Josh Rosen. Was cut by the Dolphins, and he was also signed by the Bucs. So I think Josh Rosen, this might have all been just a long road to success because you're sitting behind Tom Brady, you're on your rookie deal. Tom Brady's only going to be there for 2 years. So if you're Josh Rosen, I would park myself on that bench and say, I will take $50 a game and I will sit here and learn. Just give me a chance when he leaves. And I think it's I don't think that there's a better spot for Josh Rosen right now.
Well, certainly not unless he's going to get a chance to start somewhere, which he's not. So,
I don't think he would be able to, honestly. After the last we've seen him, he wasn't very good. So I think he needs to kind of take a step back, 2 steps forward, take 1 step back, kind of thing.
I feel like he barely got an opportunity. He certainly didn't look good from what we saw, but I also think he didn't get much of a chance to really grow or show what he can do. I mean, rookie quarterbacks struggling in their first year. We've gotten used to guys like Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson just coming in and lighting the world on fire in their first year. It's probably more common to have a start closer to what we saw that Josh Rosen had, which was a subpar start. But yeah, no, completely agree that if you're going to go anywhere and be a backup, why not go to the Buccaneers? Tom Brady is they're going to. They may have some games where they're blowing out the team and you get in the fourth quarter. Maybe you get in week 17 or something like that. And then you're right. It's in 2 years when Tom Brady retires or goes to another team, who knows?
Yeah.
There's a path for you to maybe become the starter. And it's also a smart move by the Bucs because now you get a guy in the building who can learn under the Bruce Arians system and maybe be prepared in 3 years to become the guy.
Yeah. And I think that I should amend my statement. I think that if the Saints hadn't signed Jameis Winston, I think Josh Rosen would have probably benefited more by going to the Saints because Drew Brees, it looks like he's out after this year. So at least, and that's a better, I think the Saints from top to bottom, I think are a better organized team than the Bucks. I think the Bucks, we have to kind of see how their chemistry works out, which
that's fair.
So, that's all. And I think the one last thing, the thing that I think that hurt Josh Rosen the most was the success of Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
Because he, and basically with the same team, where Josh Rosen looked like the reincarnation of David Carr, just getting crushed and sacked how many times? I mean, Kyler Murray came in and just, obviously he's a much better athlete than Josh Rosen, but it kind of, we saw what Kyler Murray was able to do under those circumstances versus what Josh Rosen was not able to do.
Yeah.
So, all right. So moving on, we have a few more. I think that's all. Joe Flacco went to the Jets, which I don't even know what to say to that. I guess, I mean, is Joe Flacco going to play for the Jets this year?
Probably not. That was one team I was thinking of when we said Josh Rosen. I was like, that might not be a bad spot for Josh Rosen either, behind Sam Darnold, who is playing for his NFL career this season. So I just, but yeah, Joe, I don't see any way that Joe Flacco finds his way to the field. It's kind of a blah signing, I guess, unless Sam Darnold gets injured. But even then, it's not like the Jets are going anywhere. So,
or gets mono again,
or he gets mono again.
Fine. Yeah. So two more. Well, not two. One more story and then one more question for you. So Josh Gordon, once again, signed back with the Seahawks. So Josh Gordon will probably play 7 games with the Seahawks and then get suspended again. So it's just such a shame. Josh Gordon, when I think it was his rookie year. What do you have? 1,800 yards receiving.
It was something like that.
Something ridiculous. Where he was just the next Calvin Johnson, basically. We're like, wow, this dude is just a monster. And then, everything that went on behind the scenes with its substance abuse and depression and all kinds of things that were happening. It's just kind of, it's sad. It's sad to see somebody with that much talent kind of just be a little out of control of themselves.
I mean, there's a lot of factors to success. It's not just talent. There's hard work, there's talent, there's discipline. And I think that's
where you end up too. I mean, your situation counts for a lot. I mean, ask Sam Darnold.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you saw this. Just another big signing. I don't know if you saw that. DeAndre Hopkins, 2-year, $54 million extension.
Yes. Speaking of, Kyler Murray. Yeah. Good for him. I know he wanted money, and I think that's part of the reason that Bill O'Brien jettisoned him from the Texans, because he was kind of making some noise that he wanted some money. Yeah, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins might be the best receiver in the league. I think that there's an argument that can be made for that. So I'm not a crazy fan of paying people early, but I mean, you want to keep them there, and they're on, Kyler Murray's on a rookie deal, so you have money to throw around, so you might as well lock them up while you have it.
And he's getting an average about $18 million a year. I mean, that's right in line with the other good receivers. He deserves to be paid at that level. But yeah, you're right. You're paying a guy early, so we'll see if he lives up to it.
And he's a much better situation, I think, that he's in now. Even though I'm not sure if I don't know. The Kyler Murray Deshaun Watson is an interesting matchup. But speaking of where you land and situationally, I kind of was thinking about this, and I wanted to ask your opinion. So Trevor Lawrence is looking like he's going to be the number 1 pick overall, and I was just talking about where you land situationally. The Jaguars are clearly just, I mean, I don't even, tanking isn't, I don't even know what super tanking, I don't even know what you would call it. It's kind of embarrassing at this point, but they're obviously going in all in on the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes.
Mm-hmm.
If you're Trevor Lawrence, would you pull a John Elway / Eli Manning and just say, no, I am not going there? Or would you just take it and run and say, okay, well, wherever I end up is where I ended up, and I'm going to do my best?
So I would like to say that I would just go wherever I think I'm going to go, because I would think that if I'm a great player, I can be great anywhere, and I can make the team around me great. I do think that I would probably want to stay in school for the next year. And then I think that would be something like, I think ideally I'd be like, no, that's it. I'll just go wherever I want to go. But when the reality came and say, hey, the Jaguars want to interview you, and I'm like, man, I just think I want to go back to college for another year, man. Let Justin Fields go to the Jaguars. Let one of these other quarterbacks go. Yeah, no, thank you.
I mean, the problem is the consolation prize if you decline the Jaguars is that you're going to the Redskins, or the Washington football team. Excuse me. So
how dare you?
I mean, it's sort of like out of the frying pan into the fire. I don't know. Yeah, you might be right and just say, hey man, I'm gonna get my graduate degree and kind of hang out here for a little while until a Tim situation pops up where I can just come in and dominate.
I think the ideal situation for him, and I don't know if it'll happen because I don't know if the team will be that bad, is if somehow the Panthers get the number 1 pick.
Yeah,
I think that's like if I'm Trevor Lawrence, I'm just rooting against the Panthers every single game. Please go 0-16. Please draft me number 1 overall, because you're right. Because the Redskins would almost have to take Trevor Lawrence, especially if Dwayne Haskins doesn't show anything this year. And obviously the Jaguars would have to take him, and honestly the Jets as well. If the Jets if the Jets end up in last place and get the number 1 pick, how do you not take Trevor Lawrence? So
it would be funny if the Redskins took Justin Fields after having Dwayne Haskins. It's just like, all right, we're just going to keep cycling through our Ohio State quarterbacks until we get one.
Yep.
And I wonder. So the big thing that I thought about today was the Bengals are in one of, I'd say, the second toughest division in football to the NFC West. And there's a good chance, a better than average chance that, especially, given AJ Green's injury history, I mean, that team could be the worst team in the league. And if you're the Bengals, you have the number 1 pick. You just spent a number 1 pick on Joe Burrow. Like, what do you have to take Trevor Lawrence, or do you? Obviously, I think you should try to trade the pick depending on how you feel about him. But I don't know. That's a rough position.
So here's the problem. I'm not going to pretend to be some. I'm not Mel Kiper over here. I'm not this great NFL, this great college scout. I will say this: Joe Burrow just had the best college football season in the history of any best quarterback season in the history of college football.
Yes,
I feel like. You probably, if he shows you anything, any promise at all this year, you take that number 1 pick, you trade back, and you get everything. You get, whatever it is, 3 first-round picks. I don't even know what the package could be. But whatever it is, you get that package, and you build a super team. I mean, that's the best. And then you trust in your ability to make draft picks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough spot to be in. I don't know, but that's gonna do it for the NFL news and for the headlines. We're gonna talk some NBA after the break and sort of switch up sports. But there was one last little headline. And speaking of other sports, to touch on, I don't know if you saw this or not, but Novak Djokovic got basically disqualified at the U.S. Open, and he made kind of a big stink about it. And did you happen to see what happened? So basically what happened, for those that didn't see it, something happened where I guess Djokovic messed up a shot or something, or he was pissed about something. He takes the ball and he smacks the ball behind him sort of out of frustration. He just shoots it right down. Somehow, some way, in sort of the worst case scenario, there was a line judge, an elderly woman line judge, standing completely by herself in this one little 2-foot long area. And the ball that Djokovic hit bounced off the clay or the floor, whatever you want to call it, and hit her, bounced up. The trajectory hit her directly in the neck. And she couldn't breathe it looked like she couldn't breathe for a little while, but she ended up being okay. But obviously it caused some serious damage. And because of that, Djokovic was given a default, which basically means he was disqualified from the tournament as the number 1 seeded tennis player. And so he was kind of arguing on the sideline there with the judge and saying like, hey, this was an accident. Like she's okay. Like I didn't mean to do it. You can dock me points or whatever. He came up with a whole list of things that they could have done instead of defaulting. And he said basically like, this is on the biggest stage in the biggest spotlight, and you're just going to throw me out. Like that's crazy. And the judge just said, game's over. Like gave him no leeway whatsoever and just game over. And I guess the rule in the rule book, if you go through the rule book, it says something, I'm paraphrasing, but something to the effect of if a player recklessly endangers someone with the ball or a racket or whatever, then he's to be defaulted, essentially. And so I was curious just to see how you felt about that, because personally, I thought he should have been given a little bit lesser. Like if this was a history, I think it would have been bad. But I think the fact that it was a one-time thing and we've never seen anything like this from him, and you can kind of clearly see that he wasn't looking where he was hitting it, which I guess is part of the recklessness of it. But it's just kind of, I don't know. What's your feeling on it?
So you would have loved to see him get the benefit of the doubt, right? You would have loved to see them like, hey, this was a mistake. Obviously he was very apologetic too. I saw him go up to the woman, really showing contrition. The only thing I will say, that there's two things I'll say here. One, if the judge gave him another chance, would he then be obligated to give other players another chance if something like that were to happen? Well, this only happened once before, or I've never had this happen before. I mean, hopefully you've never hit a ball behind you and hit a woman in the neck before, right? Like that's the fact that that's never happened before is not some big accomplishment. Like, sure. Okay, great, you never acted like that before. The other thing I'll say is, people may not know this, but I used to cover high school sports way back when I got out of college. I covered football, baseball, basketball, tennis, you name it. One of the sports I covered was the men's tennis, or boys tennis, I should say. And it was weird. Like they really, at least at that level, they really frown upon showing any sort of emotion, whether it's hitting your racket on the ground, screaming, hitting the ball really hard, in any sort of direction. They expect you to be composed and quote unquote gentlemanly all the time. I don't know how those rules influence the pros or how the professional rules influence high school, but I do think in that context is a little bit more understanding, but I still would have liked to have seen him get the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and I think, granted, when I said it's the first time it's happened, I didn't mean that, specifically that instance, but just actual, outrage or outbursts or some kind of, whether it was verbal or physical violence towards a ref or something. Where if he had a track record of being kind of a hothead and just kind of temper tantrums and things like that, I think that then you could say that the intent, it's a pattern. But I mean, Djokovic by all accounts is pretty mundane and pretty low key, even when he's winning. And screaming. I mean, we saw Serena Williams when she won her match. I mean, she let out like a battle cry. It was crazy. She was. So I don't know. I think that it's clear that there was no intent there, and I would have fined him mercilessly and cost him $1 million maybe or something, something just crazy. But I don't think that defaulting him was the right move.
I mean, last thing I'll say is maybe it's just holding him up to a higher standard, since he is the number one player in the world, since he is the best player in the game, since he was the number one seed. No one is above this. You break this rule, you show carelessness or recklessness on the court, you default.
Yeah. Just speaking of one last little tennis note, speaking of Serena Williams. Serena, by the way, I don't know if you knew this, but with her win this week, she has 100 wins in Arthur Ashe Stadium, which I think the next closest, men's or women's, is Roger Federer with 77.
Yeah.
So Serena is just, I mean, she's on another level. And
one of the best female athletes of all time, period.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just crazy. I thought that was worth noting because she's just that good.
Yep.
So that'll do it for the first segment. We're going to take a break. and we're going to come back. We have a lot of NBA to cover because it's the NBA playoffs, which is super exciting. So we're going to go through kind of the games this week and what to look forward to. So stick around. We'll be right back on the Benchwarmerz podcast.
If you're sick with COVID-19 or think you might have it, take steps to help protect other people from getting sick. Stay home except to get medical care. Call the doctor before visiting. Separate yourself from others who live with you. Wear a cloth face covering to protect others. Cover your coughs and sneezes with a tissue and clean your hands right away. Avoid sharing items with other people in your home. This includes things like towels and bedding. Be sure dishes are washed in hot water or the dishwasher before anyone else uses them. Stay aware of how you feel. If you start to have difficulty breathing or if you're worried about your health, call your doctor. For more tips, visit cdc.gov.
Welcome back to the Benchwarmers podcast, where being all talk is actually a good thing. Now, back to the action. Or talk, I guess.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm Lou Ruggieri. That's Jose Ortiz, and this is still the Benchwarmers podcast. I appreciate you taking some time to spend with us today. We've got an exciting show so far. Football's back, and we couldn't be happier. A lot of NFL news, a lot of other news we touched on in the first part of this hour. Coming up next hour, we are going all football to kind of celebrate the season starting. A few key questions for the league, and we're going to revisit kind of our picks and give you a single game to put your money where your mouth is. And it's going to be interesting. We each picked one sort of what we think is a pretty good bet. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But now we do have some NBA to discuss because it's the NBA playoffs, because, you know, it's September. So, of course, the NBA playoffs are on. And I wanted to kind of start in the East because, quite honestly, the East is a little less exciting, I guess you could say, than the West. Specifically, the Heat closing out the Bucks in 5 games. And, I mean, there's so many avenues to go down with this. So, Jose, I'm going to give you the floor. What jumped out at you the most from watching the Heat Bucks?
Just the fact that I'm absolutely stunned. I'm completely stunned by what Miami did to the Bucks, and this is before Giannis got injured. I didn't expect them to win, tonight when they didn't have Giannis, but they just exposed his his inability to hit free throws. They knocked down 3-pointers. They got to the free throw line. They stayed aggressive offensively, and they stayed aggressive defensively. It just felt like the Bucks they had no answer on offense and they had no answer on defense. Earlier in the season, or earlier, a few weeks ago, we were talking about teams that I said I thought Miami was a bad matchup for the Bucks. I didn't think that the Bucks would lose the series. Yeah. I just thought, it'll be a tough series for them to win. Miami's just a completely better team than Milwaukee, and I didn't realize that. That's probably the most stunning thing, that I have to admit that Miami, it's not even close. Miami's way better than Milwaukee, and I didn't expect to say that.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that stood out to me was, if you watch Chris Middleton in Game 4, I mean, if that guy showed up in the first 3 games, the series might still be going, because Chris Middleton, like we said before, I mean, he's got, his ceiling is high. The problem is his floor is really low, and he just, I don't know what happens when he shows up, like what clicks and what doesn't, but Giannis can't do it alone, and it's a little frustrating, I think.
Well, that's the difference between a star and a good player, a good role player. A star brings it every single night. A star, that's how you score 30 points a game. A star finds a way to bring their offense, or whatever it is that they do, every single night for the most part. He's a good role player. He's gonna have off nights, and it's gonna probably be 50-50, where one night he's good, the next night he's not. And that's what he did. They're missing that consistent second and third option, honestly, because right now you look at their team, I guess Brook Lopez is their third option. I don't even know who.
I don't know. It's
like, I don't even know who is really their consistent third option.
So maybe.
Yeah, Bledsoe. There's a couple players that just, that's the thing. It's not consistent. It's one guy. It's another. It's Giannis, and then the supporting cast, and it's very eerily similar to LeBron with the Cavaliers in his early years, where they're good in the regular season, but then during the postseason, when everyone can kind of gear up and just there's no traveling, there's nothing to worry about, and even more pronounced during this COVID era or situation because there's no travel at all, right? You're just in the bubble. All you do is basketball now, so there's just nothing else to even get in the way of anything, and to top it off, there's no home court advantage. So now, if you were the better team there in the regular season, you don't get the advantage of the boost of playing in front of your home crowd, which, by the way, that's where a lot of these role players play better when they're at home. So it just doesn't look good for Milwaukee right now.
Yeah, Milwaukee, I mean, they were such a great defensive team during the season, and it just felt like the Heat were just faster and smarter than they were sort of at every turn. And I wonder if the Bucks were fool's gold or not. Like, if they were great because they were in the East and they really weren't as good as their record said they were. Sort of like the basketball version of the Green Bay Packers last year, where it's just a very hollow, 50-win team. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
it's a fair point. It's fair to ask. It's fair to ask right now, and we're gonna see, because the decision is in Giannis's hand right now. He's a free agent, and I tremble at the thought of him getting signed by the Golden State Warriors or one of these other contending teams, because he could go to another team. You talk about, like, what do the Portland Trailblazers need? Giannis.
That would be a dynamite team. I mean, that would just be a world-beating. I think Damian Lillard and Giannis work. I don't know. I've said that for months now. I think that if you had put Damian Lillard I was saying Damian Lillard to the Bucks would be the perfect counterpart. That'd be like a Shaq Kobe kind of 1-1A situation. I mean, obviously, you put Damian Lillard on any team because it's going to make them better. But I think he'd have one of the more bigger impacts if he was to go to the Bucks. But the other way around, if you put Giannis on a team with, C.J. McCollum and Damian Lillard, I mean, that's just
and Nurkic too. Now you can move Nurkic to the 4 and have Giannis play the 5.
True.
And
they have Carmelo, who's
I was just about to say
all the mid-range jumpers in the world.
Yeah, if I'm Giannis, I mean, I'm really, really thinking about who has cap space, who can sign me, and if I'm one of these other teams that are on the edge, I'm all out blitz after Giannis right now.
I agree. And just for on the flip side of that coin for that series, the Heat Bucks, I don't think that there's been a guy who has turned his reputation around faster in 1 year than Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler, if you remember when he was on the Sixers, he was hard to deal with. They sort of picked him up because I think he left the
Timberwolves. He forced his way out of Minnesota.
Yeah, he wanted to get out of Minnesota. He went there. He wasn't getting along with Embiid and Simmons, and he was the odd man out. Tobias Harris got paid. They wouldn't pay Jimmy Butler. And he was sort of this, like, diva, tough to be around kind of guy. And all of a sudden, when he's on, like, a team that is well coached and has a strong leadership, he has flourished like almost no one I've ever seen.
He is the perfect leader for that team because they're a gritty, scrappy, take you out in the back and beat the crap out of you type of team. They're not a pretty team. They're not. It's
Pat Riley team.
It's a Pat Riley type team. They're a muscle team, and they just outwork you. They out hustle you, and that's who Jimmy Butler is. If you were matching Jimmy Butler talent for talent, and just say where's his talent rank as far as like athletic ability and things like that, I don't think that a lot of people would mention him in that top 10. But when you add that mentality that bulldog mentality that he has, he's a very tough player, and the Heat are a dangerous team right now who's just getting more and more confident.
Yeah, the Heat, it's not a fluke. They're a good team. They just were under the radar this year. The team that they're either going to be facing, the Raptors or the Celtics, and as of this recording, full disclosure, we record on Tuesday nights usually. The Celtics are up 3-2 to the Raptors. And I know you think the series is basically over, but I think that I feel like the Raptors sort of came on strong. They were down 0-2, and they kind of battled back, and then they got smoked in Game 5.
Yep.
And so I think Game 6, the Raptors have some grit to them too, and I think that they're gonna come back. And I think that the series is gonna go 7.
Well, listen, I'm not saying
I still
that
think the Celtics win, by the way. I still think
Yeah,
the Celtics win, but I think it's gonna go 7.
Listen, I'm the one with egg on my face. I picked the Raptors in 6, and I feel completely foolish now. Look, the Raptors should already be eliminated. They had a miracle Game 3 win, with OG Anunoby knocking down that shot. But I just don't see, especially after the blowout in Game 5, I just don't see them getting off the mat. There's no going back to Toronto, to get that boost. That's usually what happens, right? Oh, you got blown out. We're going to go back home and we're going to work on some things. There's none of that now. You just go back to your hotel. And listen, when this series started, I said, who's going to guard Pascal Siakam? Apparently the answer was Robert Williams and Daniel Theus. Little did I know.
Yeah,
because
little did anybody know.
Yeah, because he's averaging 15.8 points per game, shooting around 40% from the field, and has basically been a non-factor. I was like, is he on a milk carton somewhere? Because he's basically been missing from this series this entire time. And you add in the fact that Kyle Lowry, he's a good player, but he's an inefficient low percentage shooter who, if he gets hot, great, but you don't want him being your leading scorer. Fred Van Vliet, Norman Powell, these are guys who after the Nets series, I had elevated them to a level that obviously they were not at. Yeah. And the Celtics
sort of
are just
reminds
great.
me of. I look at Van Vliet as sort of like a poor man's James Harden, because he's not a big, he's not a pass first guy. He's a shoot first guy, and he's had some spectacular games in this postseason, but by and large, from just watching the games, he sort of does a lot of like James Harden-esque things where he drives to the basket and then sort of gets to the end of his drive and doesn't know, he just takes a terrible shot, or he just has an awkward angle and just throws the ball up, kind of presumably to get fouled, which, is Harden's calling card at this point. So
he kind of reminds me of of John Starks, just an overrated guy who got stopped from time to time.
Yeah, that's a great comparison, actually. And I think that the one thing I've learned from this is that the Celtics are a good team.
Oh my gosh, they're so good.
God. Jason Tatum, I love Kemba. I've loved Kemba Walker since UConn. He's just fun to watch. And Jaylen Brown, they're just so well balanced, and they're deep, and they can get scoring from anywhere on the floor.
Well, that's the scary thing. How many players can actually put points on the board for them. And I don't remember if you saw the Game 1 where Kemba Walker was so emotional after the win. And I think he had gone 2 for 13 or something like that. And he was like,
played real bad.
I would have lost this game. I'm sorry?
No, he said he played real bad that game.
Oh yeah, he played real bad. He was like, I would have lost it. We would have lost this game back in my Charlotte days, and we found a way to win this game. And that's how good they are, because you can't stop them all from scoring. And they're playing better defense than anyone in the game right now. Any team left in the playoffs, I think they're the only team in the NBA average allowing under 100 points per game right now. So they're doing it on both sides of the floor.
Yep. So you're listening to the Benchwarmerz podcast. We are on iHeartRadio podcasting lineup, app, whatever you want to call it, Spotify. We're on YouTube. You can follow us along on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at the BW Pod, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, the Benchwarmers podcast at yahoo.com for emails. Both love and hate mail is accepted. Benchwarmers with a Z. And moving on to the Western Conference in the NBA, we'll start with Clippers Nuggets. Clippers are up as of this recording 2-1. And to be honest, I'll be completely honest, I'm surprised that the Nuggets won a game, honestly, because the Clippers are just. I mean, Kawhi Leonard had probably the worst game I've seen him play in years. And the Clippers, the Nuggets rather kind of showed up, I mean, Jokic is the real deal. Jamal Murray had a pretty decent game. And they look good. I was surprised.
The Nuggets are just not in the class of the Clippers. I picked the Clippers to have to win in 5 games. The Nuggets have actually looked decent in the last 2 games after getting blown out in game 1. I just think that there's not enough. The things that have to align for the Nuggets to win this series, I just don't see it happening. You're not going to hold, as you said, Kawhi Leonard. That was like one of the worst. That's the worst game of his career, probably. You just don't see him play that poorly. I think he was 4 of 17. That's just not going to happen again.
Yeah.
So you have to find a way to limit Paul George. He's been getting hot this series. The Clippers are probably the Western Conference version of the Celtics. They're a very scary team. They haven't played as good of defense as you would have expected, but they're pretty good on offense. They have a lot of options. I just don't see any chance for the Nuggets right now. You said Jokic is great, Jamal Murray is good, but I just don't see any chance.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. I'll be impressed if this goes to 6. I'll be very impressed by the Nuggets. I think
that's
the
max.
Yeah, I think they're about a piece or 2 away, and it's just I don't know. The Clippers are just that deep and that good.
I don't even know if the Nuggets are a piece or 2 away. I just feel like the Western Conference is too deep. There are too many Hall of Famers in the Western Conference right now. There's just too many great players. I just don't know, unless of course Giannis is going to come join the Nuggets maybe. But I don't even know if that would fit, honestly. So no. I just don't see. That was, we were talking about players who had a lot to gain or lose this postseason a few weeks back, and we talked about the Nuggets and Jokic and Murray. I kind of feel like this is their ceiling in the Western Conference. If they were in the East, as you alluded to earlier, the East not being that good, maybe they could get to the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't see them getting past these Hall of Fame teams that they have in front of them.
Yep. Moving on to the more exciting series, the Lakers-Rockets. And just to touch on, the Rockets closed out the Thunder, which, of course, as we all predicted, was going to be because of James Harden's defense. And so that was shockingly impressive and good for him. But the Lakers, it's 1-1 right now, the Lakers-Rockets. There's a lot of takeaways I've had in these first 2 games. And the first one is, and I think I even texted you this during the game, if Russell Westbrook could develop just a good jump shot, never mind threes, now just that old Patrick Ewing 18-footer, just hit it and that's it. He would be lethal. He'd be just unstoppable because he might be the fastest guy in the league. He runs past people, but then it's like his body moves faster than his brain sometimes, where like his brain can't catch up to how fast his body's moving. And then he gets to the hoop and you're like, whatever. And he just kind of crashes into people. And it just, he has so much potential. He plays at such, an intensity level that is, I don't know who plays that fast. I really don't. I think, but Derrick Rose might be the last guy I saw that played as fast as Russell Westbrook does.
A few years ago, when Colin Kaepernick was still in the NFL, I want to say that I felt like he only had one speed that he threw the ball. It was just this ridiculous fastball.
Yep.
When it was on point, when it was on target, it was like, wow, what an arm he has. But like sometimes you just need some touch. Sometimes you need to take a little off the throw to make it perfect. And he just didn't have that ability. And it kind of feels that way with Russell Westbrook right now, where he can't shift down to gear 4 or gear 3 quickly enough to make himself more effective. And you're right. Not only would he just be extremely dangerous if he could shoot, the Rockets would be extremely dangerous if he could shoot. Because right now, James Harden is the only guy you're really scared of offensively. Yeah. The other guys, they can get hot. They can make some shots here and there.
PJ Tucker, he's okay. I mean,
Eric Gordon, PJ Tucker, Robert Covington, they can do something. But Russell Westbrook is the only true, really elite offensive weapon other than Harden that they have on that team. And it just feels like you can just count on Russell Westbrook to just have some bonehead turnovers, to take some bad shots, to kind of keep teams in games when they shouldn't be, or keep the Rockets from making a run, or kind of halting their runs or something like that. So yeah, if you could unlock that next level for Russell Westbrook, the Rockets would be dangerous. But I have to admit, the Rockets have been much better than I expected. When this series started, I didn't think the Rockets had a chance, and they've been playing much better defense. I don't know if people realize that they've been one of the better defensive teams in the whole postseason, which is, I can't even believe I'm saying that with a Mike D'Antoni team, but those are the facts.
Yeah.
And they've been good. So the Lakers, the Lakers are kind of missing that third option too. LeBron has been playing well. Anthony Davis has been playing well. It just feels like outside of them, there's not really anyone that scares you. Rajon Rondo is a kind of an offensive liability at times, as is all their players outside of those two guys. So this series is up in the air right now. I can't really get a read of who is going to win. I guess you have to pick the Lakers, but it's very close.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of hoping that with the Lakers, if they put on a clinic against the very, very tiny comparatively Rockets, that this might be the end of the analytic 3-point barrage that we've been seeing, because it's sort of I kind of liken it to the launch angle home run hitting in Major League Baseball, where now it's like no one cares about batting average anymore. It's just home run or strikeout, home run or strikeout. And the Rockets, when they're on and they're hitting threes, they're great. But the problem is that they're not on very often. And it's just, I get like secondhand embarrassment when I see them clank 5 3-pointers in a row. And it just seems like, dude, couldn't you have traded in, I don't know, 2 of those 3-pointers that you missed you'd have 4 points right now if you just moved in a little bit, went to the hoop, or even just took a straight up mid-range jumper. You build slowly. You don't have to swing for the fences every time you go down the floor with the ball. And also, it's just, half the time whoever has the ball just doesn't even wait for the team to show up and set themselves, and they just launch a 3 with 0 chance of getting an offensive rebound. And then it's like you might as well just hand it to the other team. Here you go. Never mind. We're not going to shoot. We just take it.
It's usually a long rebound which kind of kickstarts the transition as well. So
yeah,
it's one of my least favorite plays in basketball is the pull up 3-pointer, unless you're Steph Curry, but the pull up 3-pointer or the step back 3-pointer. It just makes no sense to me. Move the ball around, step into the 3. I don't mind 3-point shooting, but it has to be within the flow of the offense. And yeah, you're right. So often it just doesn't happen that way with the Rockets.
Yeah, and there's no reason that your center should be taking 3-pointers. It's just silly. I don't agree with it at all. But speaking of centers, the one thing I will say that I've noticed in this is that I was watching Anthony Davis very closely in Game 2, and I will tell you, I am impressed with Anthony Davis. His footwork, he was I think he was a 6'3" point guard until he grew 7 inches and then became a center. And he reminds me. And I don't think I'm hoping this doesn't come across as like blasphemy, but he reminds me of watching Olajuwon play, where his footwork is just so good at that size. I mean, his footwork is good for any size, but you factor in that he's 7 feet tall and he's able to just kind of, he guards James Harden, and it's a problem for Harden. Normally somebody that big, Harden would blow right by them, but Davis is quick, he's fast, he's agile, he's intelligent, he takes good shots. I've been really impressed with his performance so far.
Yeah, I think he's played well. I actually want him to be more aggressive. I'm just to the Olajuwon comparison, I don't think it's blasphemous. I think that's Anthony Davis's potential, right? If he plays to the best of his ability, he could be the next Olajuwon. He does have that footwork. He does have that guard ability in a center's body. Yeah. I feel like sometimes he falls in love with his jump shot a little bit too much, and I want him closer to the basket, just because he can dominate anywhere he wants.
Yeah, that's fair. And we're watching Game 2 right now, or Game 3 rather, excuse me, and it's halftime. It's pretty close, so we'll see how that ends up, and we'll kind of come back and touch on that next week. So that'll do it for their hour number 1. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. Hour 2 is all football. And we have a lot of questions to deal with, a lot of big headlining questions that we came up with about how to tell what the season is going to be like coming up. And then after that, we're going to revisit some of our early season projections and put a stamp on what we think, who's going to win the divisions for sure. And this is going to count. We'll come up with some kind of bet of some kind. And speaking of bets, we're going to give you kind of our I don't want to say lock of the week because there's no such thing as a lock, but our best bet of the week. How about that? So stick around, and we'll be right back. This is the Benchwarmerz podcast. Don't go away.
Thanks for listening to the Benchwarmers Podcast. Follow along with us on the Benchwarmers Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to review us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.